we sometimes ask our animals to do hard things and get cross because they don't get it right. And like what you've just had is asking a hard thing. It looks super simple. Leave someone else's food alone, but it's not because there's a strong motivation to be counter to the instruction. And I certainly am going through that with my challenges and the goals that I'm setting for myself at the moment with like trying to do more hard things. And yeah, it's not like it looks like a simple thing on paper. Go to bed before 3 o'clock in the morning, right? That's not that for most people, that's super easy, right? It's a simple thing on paper, but creating the discipline, creating the routine, creating the decision making behind that, and having a strong boundary. We all know trying to do those things, whatever it is in our life, that's a hard thing. Sometimes you hit it, sometimes you don't. It takes change and repeat before you start to get. So yeah, I think so there's two lessons in here. One is to have a little bit more grace for our animals if they are not doing what we ask them to do, because what we ask them to do sometimes is actually a hard thing. And I know that from animal training, when we ask them to sit there and wait for a minute while we train this one, the sit and wait for a minute and do nothing, that's a hard thing. And we need to reward them and be whatever for that. But then there's the hard thing of I'm now trying to do behavior change, which is where I'm at, changing. And that's what we talk about all the time with our community. Change your behavior, change this, don't do this anymore, add this in, do one thing at a time, set a routine, right? And it's always small things so that it's achievable, but at the same time we've got to put some grace on that these are often hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people often feel alone in their struggles. Like, why is it so hard for me? Like, everyone else does it. But if it was easy, we would all do it, and we don't. So like, you're not alone. No one's alone listening to this. In my undergraduate studies, I like literally studied health behavior change, like the psychology of how can we help people actually make behaviors, because you can go to raise your hand if you've ever gone to a certain someone who said do X, Y, and Z for your health, and it's like, okay, I know that, right? Like the classic example is like you tell a kid like eat more vegetables. Like it's not easy, right? And then you have the grown-up version of that, which you're experiencing right now.
Still eat more vegetables for a lot of us, right? That doesn't go away.
Yeah, well, and it shows up in so many different areas because you have so many barriers. If you're working on this goal of going to bed before 3 a.m., there are real obstacles in your way to doing that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in that pattern. So how do you think about, like, for you in your own journey, what are some of the obstacles you're running into, and how are you working on overcoming those?
Yeah, so you're right, because they are obstacles. So for as long as I can ever remember, like it wasn't just a thing that started, when I was 25 or something. Like forever I can remember. I was the night owl. Do you know what I mean? Like mum and dad would go, oh, it's bedtime, go to bed, and I'll be like, I'm wide awake, I don't want to go to bed. And so then I'd smuggle my torch, and I hope mum's not listening. Smuggle my torch, go under the doona and be reading by the light of the torch. And then sometimes I'd get caught, and then my torch would get confiscated, and I would still be wide awake. So then I would pull back my curtain and I'd sit on the windowsill and I'd hold my book up backwards like this to the moon or to the street light, whatever was shining the most, and I'd keep reading in the dark, right? Because I wasn't ready to go to bed. So, and then studying at university, I was working a job as well as uni, and so I would work, and I worked in the theatres. So this is an evening thing. The theatres would wrap up around about 11, go for a quick glass of wine with everybody after the show and hang out with the directors and the actors and the staff and the things and live the family theatre life. Half an hour for a glass of wine, then go home. It's midnight, have dinner, and then do my homework for uni the next day. So, and I went to uni for 10 years. So this is a lot of habit pattern, 10 years of this being right. So that becomes your normal. And then so that was the barrier then. My working hours were in the evening. And so if I wanted to do homework, it had to happen early in the morning, right? I've got class the next day. It has to get done. So you do it. So that was the barrier. Now my barrier is I basically need to live on New York time, even though I'm in the UK. So I'm 5 hours time shifted with meetings, conversations, trainings, appointments, clients, all that stuff, right? Because time zones is now right. So that's the barrier. So how do I fit into my day the things that need to happen before? It's the same question. So those are real. And when you're naturally circadian rhythm inclined to be the night owl, the solution is not, we'll just get up early and do it then, because your brain is just like, it just does. I can produce some kind of war and peace magnum opus. I can write the Declaration of Independence. I can do whatever at 2:00 in the morning. Like, my brain cells are ready to go. Productivity goes through the roof. Ideas come in and out. I'm undisturbed. No one's caught, right? It's fantastic time. It's a sacrifice to give that up and go to bed. If I try and do that at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, no chance. I can barely write my name at that time of day, because my body and my brain says, you must be asleep now. So it's a real barrier.
So why are you making the change then?
Because I know enough about the science. I know enough about neurology, neuroscience, behavior, functional health, right? To know that if I don't get the requisite amount of sleep, then I'm compromising long-term my brain, which is one of, an asset that I prize in my life, right? The ability to learn, think, speak coherently, understand things, disseminate, articulate, expand right? So that's an asset I'm not willing to lose. And I'm also not willing to lose my health, right? So even though it's not my number one priority to go to bed before 3 o'clock in the morning emotionally, right? Because it's a big sacrifice to lose that productivity time. The long-term big picture, right. The sensible grown-up part of me says, well, you're an idiot, because if you don't do that, when are you going to actually break? You don't know, but it will happen, because you know that that's the science. So don't break, get smart, be proactive, solve the problem, take the compromise, build a system that works for you within some new boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the key part that we talk about a lot, is having that. Peanut's very into this conversation. Is having that vision and knowing why you're doing it. Because if you didn't have that knowledge, if someone simply said, oh, you really do need to go to bed earlier for better health, is that really that convincing? No, I don't think so.
Because I've heard that all my life.
Right.
Go to bed, you need your sleep. Right. Go to bed, you need your sleep. Go to bed, you got to get up for school in the morning. Go to bed, right? And it meant nothing to me, because my brain wants to sit there and write some kind of novel masterpiece, or whatever. Right.
So that that's one of the reasons why we're both so big on education, is folks listening, it's not just blanket recommendations and kind of generic statements, but you have an understanding of why, so that you can really understand, is that a priority? And look, for some people it's not. For some people they would say, I'm going to take my chances because I like that circadian rhythm for X, Y, or Z reason, or those obstacles feel too big. But for you, you're like, no, it's not worth it. We're having some comments coming through the chat. What is a torch? So this is clearly someone who lives in the US. We call it a flashlight.
Oh, a flashlight. Okay, fine. Yeah, no, I wasn't. Can you imagine being under the blankets with an Olympic flame torch, Grecian relay race or something? No, it's a flashlight.
I love that. And do you just need to move to the actual Eastern time zone?
No, because I used to be on Australian time zone and I was still time shifted. So I'm now on the UK time zone and I'm time shifted. I've lived in the United States. I was time shifted when I lived there. East Coast or West Coast, I still it just, yeah. Thank you for the thought. But I think even if I went to the moon, I would still like sleep at the wrong time.
So what kind of strategies and tools are you using to overcome these obstacles? And the reason why I think this is really important is because I've been supporting people with the health behavior change for, over 10 years. And what I always hear, and I still hear, I heard it then and I hear it now, is I just need more self-discipline. And I just need to be harder on myself. I just need to crack down and do it. And there's an element of making that decision, right? But what really bothers me is when people say, I need to stop making excuses, or you need to stop making excuses. That actually really rubs me the wrong way, because excuses are obstacles. What are the obstacles that you're running into? And if we take the mindset of, get over your excuses, don't make excuses, you're not going to create a sustainable behavior change. And you hear this all the time in fitness, which I worked in for a long time. Just get over the excuses. And it's like, no, that's actually not helpful. What we actually need to do is dig into the obstacles so that we can come up with strategies to get by them. Because if you simply shove them to the side and try not to pay attention to them and just force yourself to do it, it's not going to be sustainable. So instead, by actually tuning into these excuses, real life, by tuning into what are the things that are getting in your way and getting really crystal clear on those, then you can get really crystal clear on how to come up with strategies to kind of get over them or get around them, right? Like I'm thinking of like a hill. By over them, I literally mean like, how are you going to tackle them? So what are some strategies that you've been implementing to make this sustainable, given that those excuses are real life getting in the way of your health goal?
Yeah, I'm not suddenly going to be able to pull the continent of the Americas a bit closer to the UK, and so it's easier for meetings and stuff, right? So, I mean, so this was my compromised position, right? So bedtime was somewhere between 5 and 6 in the morning, and I would give myself 4.5, 5 hours sleep, because I could do that. It wasn't particularly hard for me to function on that little amount of sleep. So I did it for years, but then knowing that was going to ultimately lead to my brain demise, right? It's like, okay, let's call the shot on that. And so here's the compromise. Most people are going to say you go to bed at like 9, 10 or 11 or something like that. Like I was never going to get that far across, but I could move from 6 to 3. Yeah. And who knows, maybe in another year, I can go from 3 to 2 or 1, which feels so alien.
I know, I can like see your body like, 1?
What? But right, so here's my first move of the board. So it's not trying to do it all in one go and do literally the impossible, because if I tried to sleep at 10 o'clock at night, you have got to be joking, right? It's just no. But 3, I can start to condition myself and set in place a thing. Okay, work stops at 2:30. That gives me 30 minutes to take my makeup off, do my teeth, write down my list of assignments for the morning, my routine, right? Mm-hmm. Then I do 15 minutes of red light therapy before I can turn the light off. So the red light therapy is a good way to help me do that in a short space of time, because it kind of intensifies the warmth, the relaxation, the slowing down. I listen to an audio book at the same time, because you can't have your eyes open looking at the red light. So it's like it's reading a bedtime story, just get you off to sleep. And so even though my brain might not be ready to go to bed yet because it wants to go to bed at 5 in the morning, I'm tricking it. I'm working with, I'm hacking it. I'm doing what right to get my body and my brain aligned into that space, so that then when it's turn off the light, let's go to sleep. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but
yeah. So what I'm hearing is you set a more achievable goal.
Yeah.
Right. And you made it very specific. That's really key. When we make SMART goals, they need to be specific, measurable, action oriented, realistic, and time bound. So you did that. And then you also created this bedtime routine, which is always one of the first things I recommend to folks is create some kind of routine that helps you wind down, that helps your body start to understand it's time to go to bed. And that actually helps to shift the circadian rhythm on a genetic level. The other thing that I'm hearing is setting a so the obstacle that you identified was work, was all these meetings and things. And so you set a really hard end time that then allows you to go into that bedtime routine.
Yeah, so I used to take appointments up until 2:00 in the morning. So I'd have a 2:00 appointment that would finish at 3, and that would be the latest anyone could book with me. And I've stopped that. I now stop my appointments at midnight. So the latest I can have is going till 1. And then that gives me some buffer time to do any post work with that, with follow up and whatever else. And so it's pushing that back, and then it's bringing bedtime back or forward, or whichever way we're talking about it. And the other thing is to track it as well. So I give myself a little tick in the box if I went to bed before 3:00, and I can see a whole line of like, success. Oh, missed that one. Okay, well, success, right? Mm-hmm. So because what you measure, right, what you're actually bothering to measure and track, somehow or other that makes it more real. It gives you the incentive to not break your patterns. It gives you that reward of, look how good I've been, look how many achievements I have. And I don't know, maybe there's some another layer to it, but that seems to be helping too.
Yeah, that's a very well supported, well researched aspect of little something that can really go a long way is literally a check mark. As silly as it sounds, some of those things, a little gold star when you're a kid and you like pee in the potty, like we can carry it over to going to bed at the right time. Do they do that in the UK? Little star charts?
Yeah.
For potty training? Okay. I wasn't sure if you caught that, if you got that reference, or if we have a torch flashlight situation. So again, it goes back to the importance of the strategies that you've come up with are very unique to you. And if you had simply said, I'm going to get over my excuses and go to bed, you would likely be probably just working up until 3 a.m. and then crashing and laying there in bed thinking, oh my gosh, why can't I go to sleep? And your brain's turning so because you've really gotten granular about it and put these strategies into place, not only because the whole goal was to go to bed earlier so that you can sleep at that time. And you very well could have just gone to bed and had a hard time sleeping, but you because you know what the actual goal is, now you're actively working towards it, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think that's sleep is one that a lot of people struggle with. So hopefully folks who are listening, whether it's sleep or something else, you can gain some benefit from that. And one, knowing that you're not alone in those struggles, just because it's simple, go to bed earlier doesn't mean that it's easy. But 2, remember to get really specific about your goals. And then get really granular about what are the obstacles that are getting in your way so that you can come up with reasonable strategies so that you can still live your life as an adult and function in society and, do your job and all of that and still take care of your health. Because unfortunately, I think those 2 things, work and health, often really do clash, whether it's the stress or the timing or, all of those things can really be an obstacle. So thank you for sharing, Penny.
Yay. Yeah, so I think the important thing is to know, I mean, you guys are listening to us because you like us. There's something about us that you trust. You've followed on and learned some things, and it's hopefully bringing great value to your life. But it doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean that it all comes easily. It doesn't mean that we're the best in the world, right? I mean, we're the best in the world at some things, but not, right? But I mean, we're all human. We all fall off the wagon every now and again, but it's the big picture that you look at and say, right, well, the cause is more important than the little battles along the way, because without that sleep, I can't long-term perform at my best, which means I can no longer do the mission of my heart, which is to save all these animals, right? So that if you really want to scale out, it's like, why are you going to bed early? Well, because I'm saving animals. Doesn't make sense cognitively unless you know all the dots in between, right? But right, why are you going to bed early, Penny? Well, early, 3 a.m. is early for me. Why are you going to bed early? Because I'm saving animals. Because it's important to me to save animals. So you find your thing, and if I fail one day, well, I fail one day, right? And then I go back and look at my chart and I put myself a star the next day, and I keep going because I'm doing it for the animals. So yes, me somewhere in the middle sits with my improved brain health and my protection and whatever else. But like most of us, we're putting our animals before we're putting ourselves, and I just happen to be putting all the animals of the world before me, but I still fit in there. So when the animals win, I win. When I win, the animals win. And so you get the double benefit. So it's definitely worth doing, even though it's hard.
Love it. All right. Well, if folks listening are also loving it, subscribe to us on YouTube. We do these lives twice a week, and comment on Facebook or on YouTube. Let us know your thoughts. What are the obstacles that you're running into? How is this resonating with you? And how are you going to now take the next step in that journey to make those health behavior change so you can do whatever your equivalent is of saving all the animals? All right, guys, until tomorrow, we will